My practice has always drawn in folks that would never go to this kind of stuff.
Right.
So engineers, nurses, like very science-based lawyers, right? Step
Right.
into to work with me. And the reason why is because I say to them, how has that served you?
Right.
How has it served you to be in your head? What has it created for you? Well, it's created
Hmm.
success, it's created money, it's created, all these things. Okay, great. And what is the deprivation of connection to your heart created for you? Burnout,
Right.
fatigue, overwhelm, anxiety, depression.
Well, welcome to the Executive Exhale podcast. I'm super, super excited today to be welcoming a friend, a colleague, an alma mater, and HeartBreath specialist, Loretta Cella. She's a heart-centered leader and founder of Breathwork Studio and the HeartBreath Institute based out of Squamish, British Columbia, Canada. Within the 24 years of her human services, she's provided coaching and leadership development across 14 countries. She's empowered individuals, particularly women, to lead fulfilling lives through holistic practices and integrating breathwork, heart science, and nature all together. She's a two-time TEDx speaker, a former finalist of the Women of Distinction Award, and her commitment to community upliftment is evident because she's used her previous initiatives for this purpose, her Passion Foundation and Global Sorority, which focused on supporting young women to move beyond surviving. While these organizations are no longer active, her focus has shifted towards the decolonization of healing and health through a deep connection to our hearts. In her podcast, The Heart Breath Therapist, Loretta engages in meaningful conversations with women who have discovered their soul's calling and sharing insights on emotional healing and self-discovery. Living with her daughter and rescue pets, she believes in the transformative power of authentic self-care and heart-centered living to inspire others to realize their fullest potential. She's also written and published a book called Unmask the Sacred Messages Within Anger, Women's Anger, which can be found on Amazon, and is now working on her second book, With Heart. Welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I haven't heard anybody read that bio before. And I'm like, oh, yeah, cool.
And you've done a lot. You have a long history of helping others and enabling healing, which is amazing. Maybe for the audience who maybe don't know who Loretta Cella is, maybe give us a little bit of more background on your journey, sort of what has brought you to where you are today.
I get, it's interesting. I get that a lot, and then sometimes I forget, and so it's always a great reminder for me to go back at where I started, because the foundation of where we start is always the trajectory of where we're going, right? Because the learnings that we have along the way. And so I started off actually as a child and youth care counselor. Started
Mm.
working with high risk, high needs, diverse children in various capacities. And I have incredibly fond memories, difficult memories, but fond
Yeah.
memories of working with, those kids. And most of the kids were, immigrant and refugees and from very diverse backgrounds. And it led me, when I finished my schooling, to Toronto, to working in the Center for Abused Women and Their Children. And most of the kids were from escaping violence and from different countries. And it was a real powerful eye opener to me of what people were facing in the world outside of my little bubble that I was living in, at 23 years old. And I knew nobody. I had like one friend in Toronto, and I stepped into this work not knowing what I was stepping into, which was like a lot of
Right.
violence, a lot of racism, a lot of just a lot of challenges in life. And what I was able to curate with the youth in a very short period of time, in a year. They kept renewing my contract. They kept renewing my contract. And I was like, okay, I think I'm done here. But we created so many amazing things by bringing community together in a really empowering and powerful way, and overcoming some of those really difficult challenges. I'd have kids that like drugs, dealing drugs is just the life, Loretta. Like, this is how it is. Walking, down the street and watching over your shoulder that somebody doesn't have a gun in their hand, just a normal thing. And I'm like, it's not normal though, but it is normal, right?
Right.
When we have different lenses. And that particular experience in that in that environment left me really burnt out, really exhausted because I put everything I had into it. And so when I left, I vowed to create something that would empower all people, but people with diverse needs in particular, to see beyond the trajectory of what was in the present. So raising potential is basically what it ended up being. And that ended up, interesting enough, creating a nonprofit that took me to 14 countries, working with girls and women and supporting them to thrive in their environments, not just locally, or not just internationally, but locally as well. And it was really interesting. And all of this plays very deeply into what I do now, um, in that every time that I go overseas, people are like, "Oh, that's so amazing. Where are you going? That's exotic." And for my nonprofit, they would be like, "Here's $3,000. Here's $5,000. Here's $1,000. Can we help? Can we come?" Like, there was just so much excitement about that. And when I'd say that I'd be working at home with a group, it wouldn't be as received. They're like, "Oh, can
Right.
we lend a couple hours, or can we do this?" And that actually led us to creating a documentary, across the work that we were doing, because there was a clear divide between what happens in another world, in somebody
Mhm.
else's, backyard, versus what's happening in our own. And what that came down to was the difference between the I and the we, which is, again, the foundation of some of the work that we do. And so what I wanted people to see was that, in other countries, everything is about the community and there is no I raised, right? And when we're at home, everything is about I and very little about we. But we need both in order to thrive. And so in the trajectory of like trying to prove to people like these are the same things that are happening in different parts of the world, same thing, it's just kind of reversed. And if we bring it together, we can create some really powerful change. And that we did. So we did the documentary, did a couple festivals locally, and then the trajectory just kept shifting and changing. I did my master's with you, which took me more to understand leadership on a different level. And then the coaching has always been a part of it. I've been a certified coach for since 2007. And so the trajectory just kept evolving. But the foundation of that original center in Toronto that I worked within has always been a thread about weaving potential and possibilities. And people always say to me, like, how did you go there? And then you worked in tech, and then you worked in government, and then you worked in this. The reality is it's people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Regardless of what industry we're in, whether you're, a nurse and you're working in a hospital, which I did. I worked with one of the health authorities, working with leadership and management, in various health regions, and we're just working with people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when I had a massive change in my life in 2019, I lost my job in the healthcare unexpectedly. I had some other personal issues that were devastating to me. And I ended up on a bit of a spiritual journey. And I
Right.
discovered and reconnected with breath work. And wow, that was a really powerful transition, because to let go of the corporate structure that the safety, security of a pension and all of those things, which I know well,
Yep.
right? You let go of
Yep.
that and you start to shift it. I grew up with immigrant parents. So, to have a government job with a pension and all those things, right? And not strive for that was like, what are you
Right.
doing? Like, but little did I know that just after my training occurred in two different modalities of breath work, and I had a plan of integrating breath work with coaching, the world shut down in 2020. And people needed to breathe. People needed to regulate. People needed to release the stress. They needed to reconnect to themselves. They needed to recreate something within themselves because the world was no longer the same, right? This is no different again than that kid in that housing unit in Toronto, right? Where their world was in this bubble that was starting to be shattered, that they needed support with. Because here was this person coming in, you know, to listen, to hear, to create, to evolve with them. And anyways, long story short, like I could probably talk about this forever, but uh, I just stepped into it 110%. I had no choice. I had no daycare. I was a single mom, And I made it work, and people just kept coming in, and it started growing, and then people started asking me to create a school, because my breathwork modality evolved into something that you don't find anywhere else. And that's because they bring the heart energetics and the heart science into the breath work as a way of bringing the science into the spiritual aspects, but really understanding they're both the same. We just separate them in our world based our own mental model or constraints, right? Our own container. But the reality is that spirituality and science are actually deeply interconnected. They are one. And it's just a view of how we see it, right? And so here we are. I actually opened the first studio in August in the world that brings together heart science, body therapy, breath work, and it's been a ride. It's been a ride the last 2 months. Yeah.
Yeah, you've been a busy lady doing all this work, and I can attest to having done HeartBreath as a client and now as a practitioner. It's a very powerful tool to reconnect people to themselves. Just for context, for people who may or may not know who I am, I I um, I started with breath work slash heart breath with Loretta, what, about 18 months ago, I guess, something like that. And it was a part of my healing journey to overcome some of the trauma that was impacting my leadership, but ultimately led to two burnouts. And doing that work has really helped me to progress in my own life. So this is a super powerful modality that you've curated. I would love it for those that don't have a sense of what the heck is this heart breath all about. If you could give them sort of a snapshot of what is heart breath exactly, what journey are you taking people on, just so they can get a little more familiar with what this is.
Mhm. Such a big question, because it's like
I know, I
what is
know.
not what is it not?
What is it not?
Yeah, like
Exactly. I love that.
I just had a group of women here last night, and I run a fall women's series. And we have 8 women in this series here, and it's a very intimate setting, right? My studio is about 900 and something square feet, but I keep these environments small because we just don't know where we're gonna go, and we
Right,
wanna create that level of safety and support for people. So, heart breath is an interconnection between heart science and body therapy breath work. And oftentimes you get, well, what is body therapy breath work? Isn't breath work just breath work? Like I breathe every day. And yes, you do breathe every day. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here in this world. But the reality is that there are kinds of breath work. So there's pranayama breath work. We know this as yogis have been using it since the beginning of time. It is a controlled breath that we use to calm the mind and find connection in the body, to find presence, right? So we use this in meditation and yogic practices. There is two other main bodies of work, which are holotropic and rebirthing. And heart breath brings in the pranayama breath to control, to regulate, but it also brings in a holotropic derivative, which is a conscious circular breath or conscious connected breath. What that breath does is intentionally dysregulate to create regulation. And people are like, what? And it's like, well, we use the breath in a particular pattern to create dysregulation in the system so that underlying stressors can come forward. Again, trauma informed, really sensitive in how we do this. And then that way, those things that are stored in our body will start to release themselves so that we can come into a more regulated state more regularly. And so we bring in the heart science as a way of connecting. And people say, well, what do you mean heart science? Okay, well, our heart beats about approximately, 86 to 100,000 times a day. And every time that our heart pumps right in our chest here, it emits electricity through the body and around our body 3 feet. So there's a beautiful body of work, a modernized work, I should say, through Heart Math Institute that talks about this field of energy and how when we hone into it and connect to it, we can actually start to shift our health physically, mentally, emotionally, and for those who choose spiritually, which again is all interconnected. And
right,
so through heart breath, we bring in this field of energy with the regulation and the dysregulation to create heightened levels of healing and health for people.
right. I love that. And as someone who's been trained in this, I can say that it's just so exciting to be a part of your cohort. So who do you train in this? What's this? What's your training the right fit for in terms of the type of person you want to bring into your cohorts, into your school?
Yeah,
If
so
you're interested in this.
Yeah. Yeah, this is really interesting, right? So it's been so diverse. So I'm the type of person, so for anybody who does human design work or interested in it, I'm a manifesting generator, which means that I also have an emotional center. So I have learned to decolonize my way to lead, and really step into the authenticity of who I am, which means that with me is that like I feel something and then I want to create it and then it manifests itself. That's just, more or less how it works to some degree. So what I've learned to do with certain things like this is take the spaghetti and I just throw it at the wall and let's see what sticks. So the Institute has been around for a year and a half, 2 years now, 2.5 years. I can't believe it's been so long. And who does it draw in? It draws in such a wide range of folks. But the key element that I've noticed with these folks that are stepping in is they have a desire to live to their potential. They have a desire to support people to thrive holistically. So, stay at home moms, nurses, acupuncturists, yogi therapists or yoga therapists. Um, who else do we have that has stepped in? Dental assistants. Right?
Right.
Like our CMP HR folks. Like I've had the gamut of folks, but ideally they are people, usually coaches, lots of coaches have stepped in. People who have a desire to work past the mind and into the full
Mm,
person. I think
right.
that kind of captures it, and I haven't quite nailed the tagline yet, which probably would help me with my marketing of it, but, in reality, it's like people just feel called in, like, people walk in the studio here and go, "I'm not really sure why I'm here, Loretta. I don't know why I'm here, but, like, something tells me that I should be here," and I'm like, "You need to come in the door, and let's figure that out."
Right.
And literally within one session, they say to me, "Oh, now I know why I'm here."
It's funny because the tagline I often use is that I hit a ceiling with my healing because this
Mm,
is kind of where the healing stopped for me was in the head. And as leaders, we tend to stay above the chin. We tend to stay in our brains because we're very logical people, right? Very sort of left brain is sort of the way that we tend to place it. But there are mental models out there in the leadership domain that heart breath or mindfulness is quote woo woo to some, not to others. I think there's more palatability now. We're seeing this now more and more. But how do you how do you speak to those individuals who maybe have these mental models around this? Like, how do you meet them so that they can actually come into this practice? I know how I do it, but I'm curious as to how you bring in folks that have this leadership mental model around, mindfulness is great for the staff, but not for us. We need to be strong. We need to do it all, all that kind of stuff that comes along with leadership. So I want to get your perspective on that.
yeah. Strength is an interesting we can define strength in all kinds of ways,
Now,
can't we?
well, that's the colonial way, right? It's sort of the way
Yeah,
to get back to that out. Yeah,
and it's like, strength in the mind is one thing, but strength in the heart is a totally different other thing.
100%.
And
100%.
so, my practice has always drawn in, folks that would never go to this kind of stuff.
Right,
So, engineers, nurses, like very science-based lawyers, right? Step in
right,
to work with me. And the reason why is because I say to them, "How has that served you?
right.
How has it served you to be in your head? What has it created for you?" Well, it's created
Mhm.
success, it's created money, it's created, all these things. Okay, great. And what is the deprivation of connection to your heart created for you? Burnout,
Right.
fatigue, overwhelm, anxiety, depression,
Yeah.
right?
Chronic illness,
Chronic
pain,
illness,
suffering.
pain,
Yeah,
suffering, all those things. And
yeah,
so what I say to those folks is, well, one of them, I'm like, try it once. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Right.
yeah,
What do you got to lose?
yeah.
What do you got? I actually have gotten to a point now. It's maybe a little bit on the cocky side, but I'll say to them, "Hey, listen, like you step into a session and it doesn't work, I'll give you your money back."
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the brain goes, "Oh, wait a second. I don't, all 60 minutes of time.
What is
Here's
she
the
talking
phone.
about? Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
step in." Right. And so really
yeah.
because I know that if people are here with me, right, and people are in a state of disease or dis-ease,
Mhm.
change has to occur. So if you do what you've always done, you're always going to get the same of what
Yeah.
you're always going to get. And unless you try something different and open the spectrum of mind, I always call them like horse blinders, right? Like the horses in a race, we have these blinders, we humans have them too. Unless you take them off a little bit to have some deeper awareness or open up to different modalities, you're always going to have what you're always going to have. And so with leaders
Exactly.
in particular, it's just like, where has this led you? Where has that not led you? What do you want to achieve?
Yeah. And
And can
there's
you be
plenty.
open?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then just can you be open? Can you be open to experiencing something different and just seeing how valuable your body is? Because your body is the one who's carrying you.
Gosh, yeah. And the amount of stress that leaders hold in their bodies in the form of headaches, in the form of neck pain, in the form of back pain, in the form of fatigue, of not sleeping at night, all of those things, or being told by the doctor that they have a cortisol spike and their kidneys or their adrenals are shutting off because of the stress levels, etc., is it's a pattern that I'm seeing amongst leaders. And I love the quote cockiness that you have about this because I've done several dozen now. I'm probably 40, 50, 60, sort of in that range, sort of sessions with people, and I'm kind of getting to that point. Just try it. It's almost like a just watch me kind of moment, and I don't want to pull politics into this, but it's kind of a little like that because it's like, just try it, and if you don't like it, that's fine. It's not for you. It's okay. But I think I've had maybe one client who resisted the entire breath work, and that's only because that individual was not ready for this yet. There was some blocks there that we have to work through before she's ready to really dive into this space. But I have found that after 1, 2, 3 sessions, massive shifts in leaders, massive shifts in how they comport themselves and how they make decisions and how they establish their boundaries. Like, it's amazing. Do you have like a story, a transformational experience that really sticks out to you in your mind that you can share with people, obviously without divulging confidentiality, but that you can share just to give people a sense, an idea of what the power of this can be for them?
Oof, so many. I want to touch on something though, because I think it's really important what you just said. Sometimes there are two ways a first session will go.
Yeah.
The first is people will have a very mild experience and be like, that's not really for me. And that is normally for somebody who is very left brain and very much in their head. This is where the science is like backs up this piece. The resistance is there because the mind is so active, right?
Yeah.
That it can't rest. And so when we shift, there's resistance, there's ego that is resisting the release because what does it mean if I release?
Yeah.
What will happen in the state of vulnerability? And the person may not be cognitively thinking about this, but the judgments are high. So when people are like, you know, this floor is, they're just like, they think of the strangest things to me, like, oh, I don't need a wool blanket. I need a cotton blanket. Or I need, like some people will go to like these little tiny things because it's like they're trying every which way to avoid dropping in. That music wasn't really for me. And it's like, well, what did it invoke for you? Right.
Right.
And so there's a one person that will have and that'll take them, like you said, 2 to 3 sessions. And once they can get there and they can move through that, it's amazing. The transformation, undeniable, 100%. And then there's those folks who step in who have a very big session right at the very beginning. Right. And so that's a way of telling like what is the trajectory of support for that person. That's how we hold space. So that I just wanted to bring that up. And because I think it's really important when people are stepping in, because I have a Google review that says to me, if the first session's not great, was one of my clients, Linda, she wrote, if this first session, just go back and try another one. Right. And
Yeah.
then you will see.
Yeah.
So transformational story. Oh gosh, I have so many of them. And it's interesting. I say that, and it's like, oh, it's actually not me. It's like people. Like it's their work that they're doing for them. So it's not all I'm doing is really holding the container, the right scientific / supportive container, right for them. I have um, one client in particular who I've been working with for about 2.5 years. She's a lawyer, and I think this is a great example. She has her own firm. She has people working for her, and she came to me with high levels of cholesterol, insomnia, um,
Mm,
high anxiety, and really frustrated with staff. This was like in the middle of the pandemic. And because staff working from home, and then they transitioned part-time at the office, and then there's lots of things that come up for leaders when they're in that state. And the amount of work that she accomplished in just a few sessions back to back was amazing. So cholesterol regulated, inflammation decreased, so she had issues with her knees, inflammation gone, um, sleeping on point and intact, like she was waking up rested. She'd go to bed for 9 hours and feel rested versus going to bed for 9 hours and still feeling tired and exhausted. Her communication shift, she had more patience with her staff,
great.
more critical thinking with her staff.
Mhm.
These are all things that she shared with me. Um, the other thing that happened was that she realized that the where her practice was not aligned with where her intended desire was when she went to law school.
That's impactful for sure.
So she went to law school and she, like took the job because it was offered to her and it was great money, and then built her, but it took her on a trajectory that was not aligned with what it is that she actually went to law school for. So
Right.
she started to shift and change. She created a side business that just like filled her heart. So she took the reserve that she had financially, created something that really filled her heart. And there's a number of other things, but I think I'll get into the confidentiality stuff there. But it's just amazing. And that's like within a year and a bit. And that's like one session every 2 weeks that she would come, sometimes once a week that she'd come to me. Now she lives far away, she has a studio, she's like, "I'm gonna come up to the studio and have a session with you so I can have it in person again," because we used to live in the same community. Um,
Yeah,
but it's amazing. I have had athletes who have pain in their bodies, all of a sudden the pain's gone.
I love that. I
Moms who
love
are in postpartum anxiety and depression, which is the reason why I got into this work, because it cured my postpartum anxiety.
Mhm.
Um, Like, it's just amazing, and people say, "Well, how can you have such a diverse," that's why I say, "What is HeartBreath?" I mean, HeartBreath is so many things, so it depends on how we use it, because we bring in neuroscience and we bring in all
Yeah,
the pieces, right? Um, and really, the opportunities are endless when it comes to your physical, mental, emotional, leadership,
yeah.
communication, problem solving, creativity. Um, it's just endless.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the ways that it took me out of flight, fight, fawn, freeze, right? Really, and I think that's a huge component of this is that you cannot be creative when you're in flight, fight. You just cannot be creative. You cannot. I'm sorry, you just can't. You're in survival mode, and so breaking that survival mode, uh, sort of crisis survival mode cycle that people are in is a huge component to leadership wellness in this day and age. Um, from your perspective, what do you think the future of leadership wellness will look like going forward? And I know that this touches a little bit on your belief systems around the decolonization of wellness and leadership, and I'm 100% on board with that. So maybe go through that a little bit in terms of what you see the future might look like if we really embrace this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between given the trajectory of our world right now and upcoming elections,
I know.
um, the trajectory of our world, in the immediate will not be very good, right? Most people know
Right.
this. But when I think about the opportunities that can be created, right? So everything is a
Yeah.
cycle. You and I did our masters together. Everything is in a cycle of death and rebirth, right? And, I truly believe that if we can step more leaders in particular can step into this work. And I'm slowing down because the possibilities are endless.
I know.
It will transform workplaces. It will transform, if we go from the micro to the macro to the micro, like it will create an entire different ecosystem.
Mhm.
Um, and it actually makes me very emotional because of where I came from. Like I came from very very linear colonial systems. I don't love using that term, but I think that,
Yeah.
it's important to just like witness that, right? Um, we that limited mindset that is all based on control and fear. fear and control,
Mhm.
right? All colonial systems, all government systems are all based on fear and control, right? In different levels. And I truly believe that if we stepped more into holistic ways of leading, holistic ways of healing, holistic ways of learning, holistic ways, going back to way indigenous peoples, right? And integration. So I firmly believe the integration. I was just talking to one of my teachers yesterday about this. There is an integration of what was in what will be. And if we can bring those two together, we will see a difference in presence.
Mhm. Yeah, love that.
Um, and I see it in, I had a leader who owns a business here in town come in, and we did a strategic alignment session in the studio. And in these strategic alignment sessions that I do, I bring in um, the foundation of leadership, but I also bring in the experience through the heart,
Mm,
and the experience in the body, and then the experience through action. And which is the mind, taking the mind, the body, and the heart and working together. And we went through a 90-minute process, and we got to within 90 minutes, we're able to create a strategic plan. Why she's not in that strategic plan? What is the issue that has been blocking a belief system within herself? And we were able to move all of that in 90 minutes and have actionable items at the end.
right.
It was amazing. And her face, she'd
Mm,
never done anything like this before. And she was just like, I don't know where we're going. I trust you. So let's just see where we're going to go with this. And it was incredible. It was like
yeah,
she gave me a hug at the end, and she was like, thank you. I'm like, you're welcome.
amazing.
But that's not me. That's just me holding the container. That is you, because you are ready to step in. And when you're ready to step in the resistance is normal. We're humans. We don't like change, right? As a change
Mm,
manager consultant on multi-million dollar projects for the city
yeah,
of Vancouver, right? Like, I worked on big, massive projects with engineers and lawyers and HR, and people don't love change. And when you provide the right change container, safety, security, with a little ego, right?
mm,
You gotta put a little bit of that in there, right? Because you gotta
a little
satisfy the
something.
part of you. You can't deny it.
Yeah,
So this is the thing about decolonization. We cannot deny parts of self. As soon as we deny parts of self, which is what regular leadership is, we will get resistance.
yeah,
Right. Same with my women's group
100%.
here. The women in this group, they're teachers, they're leaders, they're managers in this women's group that I run. And part of last night, we were going through the ADKAR model, right? We went through the awareness piece last time. This team, we work around desire. And I said the only way we fully get desire to create change is when we recognize the parts where we're resistant.
Yeah.
And we have to just name them and put them on the table.
Yeah, and it's funny because I would get resistance to the resistance naming, 'cause it meant you know what I mean? 'Cause then it meant I actually had to deal with it, or I had to not push through it, but move through it. Find ways
Yeah.
to move through the resistance. It's just interesting to me. Uh, but I love that. I love that. And the amount of change that you're creating in the world is, it's quite mind-blowing, Loretta. I'm so in awe with what you're bringing to the table, and even in the time that I've known you since RRU, um, it's a shift that is noticeable in your energy and how you show up and how you're helping your clients, and I just wanna applaud you for that. Not to applaud your ego so much, but just to, like, let people know, like,
I'll take it, Tammy. I'll take
our
it.
great one of the things that one of my friends/clients slash clients said to me the other day is, "Tammy, you are the best testimonial for your life, because I've known you for 20 years and you've changed so much because of the growth and the healing you've done." So I can say the same thing about you, right? In the time that I've known you since the mid-2010s, you know, your shift has been pretty impressive to watch. Um, if you had one piece of advice for a leader today who's in crisis, what's one thing you could suggest they start doing today to help themselves out? We're gonna start wrapping up the podcast, but I really wanna make sure they have something tangible they can take away today.
Well, it's funny because I just did it. Spend some I automatic it's not even like I can't even think about it right now. It's just like, it just does it. Breathe into your heart.
Right.
It sounds ridiculously easy, and you're like, people will often say like, "What?" Just when you wake up in the morning, in the middle of your day when you're sitting at your desk, At the end of the
Yeah.
day, before you go home, before you take your stuff home with you, right? Take a moment, or in the car. I even give that to leaders in the car before you go home. Just take a moment and just breathe into it. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
All you have to do is
Just
get
notice.
conscious with your breath, get conscious with the beat of your heart, and just notice. That noticing brings us back to the fundamentals of life, our breath and our heart. These are the two things that keep us alive.
Yeah.
And once we get back to the foundation of us as humans, we can actually create a much different trajectory for ourselves. And
Yeah.
so the very first step, if you're like, I breath work's not, I'm not ready for breath work. I'm not ready to like get into the, the stuff. It's like, okay, but
Yeah.
this is here. And we know that heart health in our world right now is not good
Yep. It's the number one
because
killer
we've
right
not
now.
paid, yeah. And we've not been paying attention to it.
Yeah.
Right? The one thing that keeps us alive is the last thing that we pay attention to, unless what? We end up in a critical situation where we end up in the ER, or we end up in the doctor's office, right? Or we end up in our armchair or couch with pain, right? Is that stopping and pausing and just being with it. You will notice, you can do that for 7 days, once a day. You will start to notice something shift for yourself. Mhm.
I love that. That's an excellent piece of advice. So, just wrapping things up, where can people find you? What's the best way to find Loretta? If you're interested in Loretta's offerings, where can they go?
There's so many places, but the easiest way is Google. If you just Google my name, honestly, it's joinbreathworks.com is where they can get the stuff around the breathwork and the classes and the training and all of that stuff. And then if you go to lorettacella.com, and then there's some additional stuff that you can get from me around the coaching and those key components of it as well. You can learn more about my background, or LinkedIn. It's a great opportunity in there, and just see, from an academic, if they need that information, it's all there as well.
Yeah, and all those links will be in the show notes. So if anybody's interested in taking a look at what Loretta's has to offer, it'll all be in the show notes. Thanks so much for being a part of the show. I really loved having you today. I wish I had 2 hours, but I wanted to kind of keep us at a reasonable time frame here. But
Yes.
super happy to have you. So thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation and connecting with you.
No problem at all. And thanks again for those that are listening. If you're tuning in to Executive Exhale on the podcast or watching on YouTube, thanks for being here. Again, all of the information that we shared today is going to be in the show notes. And feel free to reach out to her. She's in Squamish, BC. So if you want to go check out her classes, man, do so. I'm actually looking forward to getting out there myself and trying this out. I want to try sound immersion in a fullest way. I know you sort of introduced us to it in training, but I really want to do that. That seems like a really exciting offer you have. Until next time, folks, take care out there.